Hey guys, my name is Matimeo, and welcome to another episode of Sunday Mailbox. This is a video series where you, the viewer, can submit your gaming or Battlefield-related questions, and then I will give my humble opinion on them. To get the formalities out of the way real quick, if you would like to submit your own question that could be featured in an upcoming episode, you can do so by leaving a comment down below, or by sending me a Facebook and Twitter message. The first question for the day comes from Eric, and it is, what do you think about increasing the maximum damage of the PDWs to 25 so that they would only need 4 bullets to kill someone, and this would make them more useful in close quarter combat? I think that this is a marvelous idea. The PDWs right now in Battlefield 4, while they're decent, you can get the job done with them. It's not like flailing around with a wet noodle. When you want to be competitive, using something like the assault rifle LMGs or the carbines are going to be far superior than the PDWs, just simply because of the way that they've gone about designing out this class of weapon. When we really get down to it, if you use a high rate of fire PDW, which should dominate in close encounter combat, if you compare it to a high RPM assault rifle like the AEK, or let's say an LMG like the MG4, the PDW is basically on par with those two guns in close encounter combat, but the further out the target goes, the LMG and the assault rifle have a clear advantage because their damage doesn't drop off as significantly, and they deal with less bullet spread. An AEK is going to dominate a PDW in pretty much every single circumstance. It's ridiculous at this point. And so I'm under the mindset that if you have a class of weaponry that's only designed for doing well in one type of combat scenario, close encounter combat, then it should do really well in those circumstances. Like, it should have an advantage over the other guns and not just be on par with them when you get in a firefight in those types of engagements. That's just my 2 cents. And so with your suggestion, bumping it up to 25 damage, making it a 4-shot kill within about 8 to 12 meters, I think that that is a marvelous idea. Would it make them overpowered? Hard to say. Like, this would be amazing for something like the CZ3A1. It wouldn't be a blanket buff because we wouldn't want the P90, for example, which I think is at 20 damage right now. We wouldn't want to bump that all the way up to 25 because that would just be flat out absurd. Can you imagine running around with a P90 doing 25 damage with 50 rounds in the mag? Like, that would just be unstoppable. Like, that would be fantastic. And so we couldn't blanket buff all of the guns, but just increasing it slightly for a select few of them, I think would be a great step in the right direction. It wouldn't make them blatantly overpowered because their damage drops off significantly. As soon as you get into a medium long range engagement, you're going to be back down to requiring 5, 6, 8 bullets to drop them. But at least in those close encounter situations, you'll have the advantage. The PDWs will finally have their strength on the battlefield, and people will hopefully start to use them once again. The next question comes from Seth, and it is, what if they made Levolution a competition? For example, the Siege of Shanghai Tower could fall towards the US deployment side or the China side, and it could block off the roads, making that team at a disadvantage. Now, this is a really interesting concept. At its core, though, in a primitive sense, you just described what Levolution is all about. If your team cannot hold on to that central capture point for the life of you on Siege of Shanghai, the enemy is all hunkered up there, they're using it as a platform to jump on over to all of the other objectives, and it's ruining the game for you, you are losing because of that advantage, then it might be a good idea to bring down the tower. Your idea, though, takes it a step further. What if the tower could fall a different angle? What if that would give you a large advantage if you just had it crumble on a different side of the map? Like, that's a really interesting idea. The problem that we run into, though, is I think that the maps would have to be designed around this at its core, because if we had it on Siege of Shanghai, for example, I think it would turn into a hot mess. You know that if this was in the game, that the start of the round would just be try to take down the tower as fast as you could so that your team would have an advantage. It wouldn't really be about taking the objectives, it would be all about just trying to drop that on their side so that your team would get the clear victory. They would also need to make sure that it wouldn't give you such a large advantage that it wouldn't win the game for you. If that, once again, it would further cause this problem of just trying to activate these Levolution moments, and I think that would be a problem in of itself. And so in my eyes, they would really need to design these Levolution moments around the maps and think about how that would dynamically change the battlefield and if that would improve the gameplay. At the end of the day, it needs to be fun. It needs to enhance the gameplay, and if that's not happening and it just causes more problems than it solves, then it might not be the best solution. And so while I love this idea, I love the concept of dynamic destruction, dynamic Levolution, I don't think that they can just slap it all onto the existing maps and call it good. They would really need to design the map and design these moments from the ground up and make sure that it's well balanced and is fun and enhances the gameplay. This might be something that we see in the next Battlefield game. This might be something that we see in a future title, because that would take destruction to the next level. Like, that sounds amazing in concept. I don't see it happening for Battlefield 4. It would be a huge time investment for the guys in DICE LA. I don't think that they have the time to actually implement something like this, but I could definitely see, if it's done correctly, I could see this being in like the next big Battlefield game. Really interesting idea. The next question comes from Honey, and it is, what do you think about the new squad game? Do you think it's finally going to bring that competitive first-person shooter action that we've always wanted? Well, from what I've gathered so far, Squad isn't trying to be a competitive first-person shooter. They're not trying to rival Counter-Strike, because it just doesn't fit with the game that they're creating. Who knows, maybe I'm wrong, maybe they are trying to break into the competitive scene, but these are the guys that created Project Reality from Battlefield 2. Realistic, large-scale, epic warfare. Really tactical gameplay on a huge scale. I think they've mentioned that they want to get maybe 128 people on a map. I could be wrong on this, but I think that's their goal and that's what they're striving for. So basically just think Battlefield, but in a more realistic sense. Like, that's what Squad is going to be all about. Personally, this sounds incredible. I love realistic gameplay. I'm sure many of you guys already know that. I love Red Orchestra 2, Insurgency is fantastic. I'm sure if I picked up Arma 3, that would be right up my alley. And it seems like they are going for those style of games, but putting it on a huge scale, 128 people, even if it was 64, that just sounds amazing, and I cannot wait to get my hands on it. It's still early in development. I know that there are a couple videos out there, but from what I've seen so far, it really does look top-notch, and it seems like it's gonna scratch that itch for a lot of tactical gamers out there. And so while I'm really excited for it, I think it has a ridiculous amount of promise. I cannot wait for that tactical realism gameplay. I do not think that this is going to be something that rivals other competitive first-person shooters out there. The next question comes from Andrew, and it is, do you think that Operation Metro could use a revamp? Currently, there isn't enough flanking routes, and it turns into a meat grinder in the middle of the map. Oh, Operation Metro, how I despise you. This is a map that I thought that DICE could have improved upon significantly. We already knew that back in Battlefield 3, that it was a meat grinder. It's still a meat grinder in Battlefield 4, but they said, hey, you know what, we're gonna try to improve some things by adding in a few more routes and avenues. There is that little left flank or that little tunnel off to the left or the right, depending on what side of the map you're on, and then you can take the elevators. Like, that's cool, that was a nice addition, but it still doesn't work for 64-player Conquest. In my opinion, one of the ways that they could have vastly improved this map, especially for a 64-player Conquest, is added a way to get onto the top of the metro around where all of the buildings are. That would have been amazing. Like, that would have opened up way more player space, a lot more areas for you to flank around and catch your enemy by surprise, or simply just more area for 64 players to be around, and I think that that would have made a huge improvement on the map. Clearly, that was what DICE was not going for. They wanted to keep the essence of what makes Metro Metro, and it seems like for a vast majority of the player base, they hit the nail right on the head. There are a ridiculous amount of servers that still have 64-player Metro. I would say it's one of the most popular maps right now in Battlefield 4, which is insane in my eyes. And I think what it just comes down to is that people like the meat grinder. They like to spawn in and 2 seconds later be right back into the action shooting at someone. And while for me it's not my cup of tea, who am I to say or to complain when clearly a vast majority of the Battlefield community enjoys that type of gameplay? I mean, there are an absurd amount of servers running it. Clearly people like it, and so who am I to critique a map that people really enjoy? And so while yes, I'm not a fan of it. Yes, I would have made large sweeping changes. I would have expanded upon it. I would have added hopefully just more tunnels, more flanking routes, or even better have an upper level above the metro. I think that would have made a perfect map for Battlefield 4. It may not have been the right way of handling things because people wanted the Battlefield 3 version of it, which is that meat grinder type of gameplay. But yeah, guys, that is about it for today's Sunday Mailbox. I hope you enjoyed. As always, if you have a question that you would like me to answer in a future episode, you can let me know down below in the comments or by sending me a Facebook and Twitter message. But until tomorrow, guys, have a good one and take it easy.